Hello, everyone. So I guess we're going to go ahead and get started here. I guess I'll start with more about blockchain, the company, for those who aren't aware. Blockchain is one of the leading software providers in the Bitcoin space, and arguably one of the earliest, most polished websites. We essentially have uh, two or three parts to our business. We first started as a Bitcoin block explorer. Um, And so we actually help people navigate the blockchain back in the early days of Bitcoin without having to run a full Bitcoin node. And it's evolved to much more past that. We have charts and analytics available for general spectators or developers. Um, and then a little bit after we came out with the Block Explorer, we came out with one of the first wallet systems where the users can still be in complete control of their Bitcoin while, again, not having to run the full Bitcoin node. And then a little bit about myself. I've been with blockchain for roughly 3 years now. Funny enough, I was their first intern, and at the end of the internship, they offered me a full-time position. Um, I work mainly on the platform's API side, so I'm pretty developer centric. And if anybody wants to ask me any tech questions, that's fine. So I like to tell people how I got started in Bitcoin. It actually began when I got into college. Uh, Bitcoin was a new thing, and then I had some graphics cards laying around. So what I did was before my freshman year in college, I worked with a couple friends to rig up this monstrosity of a computer to mine Bitcoin. And my dormitory had free electricity, so I figured, I would essentially try to make my tuition back as much as possible. Uh, and the bottom left picture, you can see that this computer ran under my fan, and during the winter we actually didn't even need to turn on our heat because this thing would just put out so much energy that it would just heat the entire apartment. And doing all this, the number one question people ask is, "What is Bitcoin?" And to different people, it means different things. Um, but the analogy that I've heard and I like the best is the comparison to an email. Um, so in this example, if you had an email address and you were in America and you wanted to send it over the internet to somebody in the UK, you know, it, everybody understands this. They log on to their email provider, they send an email, and they don't really care where the friend is because they have access to the internet. There's no fee to send an email. It's instant. It's global. So Bitcoin is much the same way, where you have your specific email address, which is called a Bitcoin public key, and there's only one public key that'll ever represent you, so you don't have to worry about somebody else owning the same email address, or in this case, a public key. And then just like an email, you would use the internet, arguably a little bit more magical, to send your friend some Bitcoin. And it's global, it's instant, and it's so much cheaper than the current system has. And the example here is also with your email account. You have an associated password to log into the email. And so once you have that password, somebody can see your emails. And that's the same with a Bitcoin address. The Bitcoin public key is essentially your email address login, and then that secret password that you use to log into your email, there's a secret private key that gives you access to the associated Bitcoin in that public key. So as long as you keep your email account password safe, your email is fine. And same thing with Bitcoin. As long as you keep your Bitcoin private key safe, you're perfectly fine. So Bitcoin is another currency. It was designed to be an alternative to currencies that have existed for hundreds of years. I mean, currencies itself have existed for much longer than that. But the only difference between today's currencies and Bitcoin is that Bitcoin purely exists and relies on the internet. And that would be a revolutionary topic or idea, but in today's society, how much of our banking do we do online alone? So it might have been really radical in 15, 20 years ago, but the society is moving so quickly that doing something that's purely online based isn't even a factor or like a drawback to something. So Bitcoin is really trying to take advantage of that. So why Bitcoin? And I actually did research into this, and I wanted to know, okay, if I wanted to send my friend a wire transfer who's in the UK or in Japan or something like that, what are the steps to take? And I was intending to do all the research on this and then actually follow through on it, but just doing the research alone on the steps and fees that it would take to do a bank-to-bank wire transfer was ridiculous, and it made me realize that this banking system is something that has existed for over 30 years that hasn't really had a major contender to breed competition, like actual change. So the banks, they figure, there's no other system alternative, there's no competition, there's no need to innovate. There's, it's a system that works. It may not work the best, but there's no other option. So that's why Bitcoin, I believe, can truly make a difference in that instead of bank to bank or system to system or company to company, Bitcoin is truly the first step to bring some of the power of leveraging the internet back to the individual. And so instead of bank to bank, in Bitcoin, it's more person to person, peer to peer. And the only step in a Bitcoin transaction is you just have to broadcast it. Just as you would click send on an email, as soon as you hit send, it broadcasts it to the Bitcoin network, and your friend sees that you sent them Bitcoin. So this may be a little bit more political, but I just want to stress the point that in the developed world, in the developed countries, the banking system is really nice. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like, you go to the grocery store, you swipe a card, and it's instantly verified. Visa, MasterCard, Discover. That's great, but that doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. And there's a lot of other places in the world that their banking system is really flawed and corrupt, and the people don't really have a choice because there's only one choice. I mean, they have to have a bank account somewhere, and it's just something that's so engraved in society that it's going to take time for an alternative to be an actual option for most people. But I argue that it's getting there, and the Bitcoin introduced the realm of cryptocurrencies, so it's almost the cat's out of the bag. And whether it's Bitcoin in 5 years, I don't know, but I can tell you it's definitely going to be some cryptocurrency that's going to be a legitimate option for most people. And this is the coolest part. This is sort of what really drew me to Bitcoin was, as soon as people hear about it, they're like, they instantly think that there's a catch, or there's a company that's going to profit off of it. There's no such thing as a free lunch, but the coolest thing about it is that the entire program, the entire system is open sourced and public, so people can go in and see exactly what this entire program does. What makes it tick, to verify themselves that there's nobody secretly profiting. Nothing like that. And not only do you get that ability to go in and check, compare that with a bank, try to see what their systems do, how secure your bank accounts are. It's unheard of. So this is a system where not only people can go in and like community-driven, verify that it's secure, there's improvements made, and people will actually contribute. So you have this project that's some of the greatest minds all over the world contribute to. And I mean, that's something that's truly incredible in and of itself. So, like I said earlier, I'm more of the development side, so they asked me to give this presentation and steer it towards fintech. So I'm just going to touch on some of the cool tech things that I think this technology can bring. And so it's a cool system in that some people argue that Bitcoin isn't Bitcoin isn't the end product to like this technology. People argue that the greatest gift Bitcoin gave was blockchain technology, a distributed consensus mechanism that has no central point of failure and no central authority. And you can see on the bottom right where for something that needs to be cleared through a clearinghouse, you have a bottleneck even within the banks that there's failures, there's downtime, there's wait time, as opposed to a distributed ledger where everybody's on the same page always and everybody can verify each other's work. So it's much more of a global friendly framework that can be applied to existing technologies. And just the graphic on the left, some people will say it's a distributed, some people will say decentralized. There's only the people that are really nitpick will call you out on it, but for most part, distributed, decentralized, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Bitcoin blockchain technology. So some of the four most exciting, or the ones that really caught my eye in development as far as taking the idea of the blockchain that Bitcoin gave and giving it a new meaning are these four things. Smart contracts, which some of you may have heard of, some of you may have used, or not, that's fine. Automated currency exchange and remittance markets, trading platforms, and then data storage. So starting out with smart contracts, this one is essentially something that somebody wants to write and then have it be stored on the blockchain and then have other people be able to access it on the blockchain. And the example that I give here is you have a supply chain smart contract. So a company would be able, or even a customer would be able to put out a contract when they place an order for a product from a company. And then, through supply chain, you have a lot of different vendors or, companies that help move the product from point A to point B, even from, if you want to think assembly to product to sale to customer. And so if you could have a system where there's a contract that's available on a distributed ledger network, and then at each point in the chain, the companies, the individuals, whomever, they'll be able to make an API call, a request to this smart contract to mark and say, reporting in that the product has been assembled. And the fact that it's distributed and global means that these variety of systems, whatever they're using, they'll all be sharing the same language of the smart contract, which is pretty advantageous in terms of trying to incorporate different software devices across 10, 20, 30 different people. It would get tough really quick. So this is an attempt to create one synonymous language between all those different facets. And another example would be you could have, I made a smart contract where, just for testing, where you could have decentralized voting. So you make a smart contract and then you push that into in this case I used Ethereum, you push that into the Ethereum network, and then as the smart contract creator, you can create a poll of option A, do you like apples? Option B, do you like bananas? And what you do is then you as the contract creator can give access to different Ethereum addresses, like Bitcoin addresses, like email addresses, just something that identifies the other person. You give them authorization or access essentially for a vote. And so, you give this authorization to 10, 20 people, and then they're able to use their Ethereum to interact with this contract and place a vote. And then the fact that this is on a distributed, publicly viewable ledger, everybody can see everybody voted, once, everybody, who or who didn't vote if that's part of your smart contract. So, this technology is still in its early infancies, but there's people working on it to really polish out use cases. The second example that I had was automated currency exchange and remittance markets. So there's this technology called Ripple, and essentially what they try to do is they say, well, you don't really have to necessarily move the value, like you don't have to actually send the money. What you could do is you can send debt. And what I mean by that is, like, they essentially trying to find a shared connection between your point A and point B. So if you know Bob and Bob knows Charlie, and you want to send Charlie $20, you both can just shift debt in between Bob. And so that's the example with Ripple. It's still in development, but I thought it was cool. And it's definitely targeting the right market. I mean, the global remittance market just with Western Union alone is ridiculous. In the highest cost corridors, it's in excess of 20% of $200 or more. And you can see on the graphic on the bottom right that the top remittance corridor of the United States and Mexico, is $25 billion market, because a lot of people, come here to the United States to work and then try to send money back to friends, family, and Western Union really just sees that and takes advantage of it. I mean, and again, it's because there's no real alternative or contender that people can feel that they trust. And I'm just saying that Bitcoin may not be the final solution, but it definitely is breeding or creating something that can compete with these giant companies that have a huge corner of the market share into something that helps the average day person. Another thing is the trading platforms, and in this example, I'm just talking about Kraken Exchange. But essentially, the Kraken Exchange, you can buy and sell over 75 different combinations of fiat and cryptocurrencies. And these markets never close; they're always moving. And in some cases with these currencies, they're pretty volatile, which traders love because they can usually try to hedge and turn the most profit. So it's like a pure laissez-faire market, which I like. And then finally, one of the applications that just recently came out of beta is this project called Storage, which leverages the blockchain to rent out your hard drive. So what this does is, I say it's like the Airbnb to your computer, but if you have a desktop that's always on, you can, and you use, let's say 200 gigs out of 800, you can rent out 500 gigs of this hard drive to other people who are on this network. And how this program works is it takes a file and it'll create shards. So if you have 100 megabyte file, it'll chunk that up into 1 megabyte blocks, and then each one of those blocks will be replicated 3 times. And then all of those shards, is what they call it, will be like distributed throughout the entire network of people sharing their drives. So theoretically, you would have 3 redundancies of a file. And when you want to retrieve the file, you leverage a system called distributed hash tables. And so this is, again, like, decentralization, distributed technologies is the name of the game. And so leveraging distributed hash tables, you'll be able to find the file without needing a central authority or, a single point of failure to retrieve these files. And then a couple months ago, Heroku, for those who don't know what it is, Heroku is a pretty popular development platform for people to, usually web applications. So they'll develop something locally, like a website or project, and then they can use Heroku to make it publicly accessible for free in some cases. And so Heroku actually offers storage support, which turns out to be a cheaper alternative to Amazon Web Services. And that's a really smart way for Heroku to do it, because Heroku can manage, Heroku can facilitate rather the process of connecting and storing and distributing on the storage network, and still pass on the savings to the end user. So it's a win for Heroku. It's a win for the customer. And arguably, the Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, they have huge data centers, distributed as much as they can throughout the country, throughout the world. But again, like this is leveraging the blockchain is a global effort. And while Amazon might have 7 or 8 massive data centers across the country, if 100 people in every state or 1,000 people in every state were to rent out their hard drive, you would have a pretty significant advantage over upload and download compared to Amazon Web Services. So this is where I'm going to talk about essentially some of the stuff that our API platform can do. And when you boil it down, essentially we give you the option so you can either log on via the web interface to access your wallet, or you can just as easily send and receive payments via our API. You can access everything that you can see on our site is available via an API call. So if you really wanted to, you could make a Block Explorer competitor. You can get price data, of course, and then payment processing, which is really popular for people who just want to receive it, but not much more. And if you wanted to poke around while I talk or not, it's up to you. All of our API documentation is available via Blockchain.info/API. But the most popular one, and I know there's probably a lot of developers on the call, so I didn't know which language to pick, so I just did rotated 4. So this is in PHP, but this is essentially a way to receive payments without blockchain needing to have any access to your Bitcoin. And this leverages something called an XPub, which is something that can help us know what public Bitcoin keys to generate for you that only you have access to, and then does not give us that associated private key. And then you specify your server's callback URL. So in most cases it's a merchant selling something or providing a service that needs payment, and so they'll make the request to our servers, get the Bitcoin address that's going to be able to be accessed by them and only them, and then once this Bitcoin address is paid, like you see in the bottom is like the example response. So once this Bitcoin address gets paid, the callback URL of whatever store that they're running will get sent a notification from our servers that say, hey, you just received a payment of this amount from this address, and then here's the transaction hash. So that way they can verify that they get paid. So this is in Python, and this is our blockchain wallet API, which is, I think, our tied for first or second most popular API, but essentially for people who want to create a site that programmatically, sends and receives Bitcoin, then they leverage this module, which lets them do everything that you would be able to do with a traditional wallet, except just programmatically. The WebSocket API, so this is in Ruby. The WebSocket API essentially lets you plug right into the live stream feed that is the Bitcoin network. So every new transaction that gets broadcasted, every new block that gets mined, this will be, you'll essentially be plugged into our servers. So as soon as we find out about these new transactions, when we find out about these new blocks, we'll share that directly with your server for if you wanted to do like data and analytics, or confirm that payments have been made into a block or something like that. And finally, simple but sweet, the exchange rates API. So our customers will normally utilize this to if they're selling a $40 game, when somebody clicks checkout, this API will automatically be able to tell them what's the equivalent Bitcoin that they need to ask for. And then this is when they usually go back to our received payments to say, okay, you were ordered a $40 game. At current market value, it's, whatever, paid to this address. And so that's pretty much it as far as the presentation go. I wanted to, because there's a lot to talk about, and I wanted to kind of just touch on the stuff that I thought was cool. But at this point, I have a couple of cool charts that I have on the website that I wanted to show people. But if people were more interested in diving into the nitty-gritty and on how a Bitcoin transaction works, I'd be totally cool with that too. It's just mainly what people want to see. So let me check at some of the questions. Okay. So let me just go to the website, and then I can answer some of these questions. So this is what the website looks like. If you guys want to go to Blockchain.info, that's the URL. A couple of the cool stuff I wanted to show is under charts. But you can essentially see the current value of Bitcoin is a little over $1,000 right now. Average block size, that's how many transactions the Bitcoin network can hold per 10 minutes, and the closer to 1 megabyte, the worse, because that means that some transactions have to wait longer for there to be available space. Transactions per day, self-explanatory. Mempool size, that goes into the average block size thing, where when people make transactions and they don't make it into a block, it just goes into this memory pool. And as this grows, there's more and more transactions waiting to make it into a block. That's boring. These are the different pools that mine blocks, and you can see it's the Hashrate Distribution. But essentially, of all the huge companies or warehouses that are in charge of mining Bitcoin, these are the distribution as to where, or rather, who ends up mining the Bitcoin. And the largest pool here is Ant Pool at 16.8%, and then you can see that their associated count is 96 blocks compared to Bitfury's of 58. And so this is another cool graphic that I wanted to show, essentially showing, and this is essentially what our servers can find and what our servers can connect to. So people can mask their IP and change this location, or it might not be a node that we're connecting to. But this is like a rough idea of the distribution on Bitcoin nodes across the country, or across the world rather. And so you can see it's pretty heavy in the US as far as Bitcoin node connectivity, and then in Europe, and then a few in Russia. China's a hit or miss, and then not much in here. And you can see this dot isn't an oil rig or plane. It's the IP address 0,0,0,0. So it's just what we couldn't resolve. So let me open up this thing. So here's a question: how does one associate a monetary value to Bitcoin? And that's really one of the it's really only as valuable as people perceive it to be. I mean, it's pure supply and demand, like I said earlier, and it fluctuates as people believe in it, and there'll be news articles that come up periodically, like I forget this one, but it's influence. So at one of these dips along the road, it was up, and then a news article came out saying that China completely banned it, and then immediately it went down. So it's not bound to gold or anything. It's purely just what people are willing to pay for it. Somebody asked if they can get the slides. Sure, that's fine. So how can we contribute? I mean, Bitcoin. Yeah. So, I mean, if this person's asking how you can contribute to Bitcoin, then that's you can I have not personally ever contributed to the source file, just because like I said, it's some of the smartest people I've ever met work on this. But yeah, so I mean, if you're a wizard, then feel free. Uh, how is Bitcoin different from internet banking? Well, it's different in that, okay, so I can explain how our system works. And this would paint a good example. No. But essentially, what happens is when you access your internet bank, you're essentially looking at an Excel spreadsheet or a MySQL database of a number that represents how much you have stored in the bank. If you have $10,000, you log in, it says you have $10,000. But in reality, that bank is using that money. It's making money off your money. And Bitcoin is different in that with our wallet, when you access it, it's essentially completely different. So when I was saying earlier that if like the email password, as long as you keep that secure, nobody can access your email, and as long as you keep your Bitcoin private keys secure, nobody can access your Bitcoin. So the way that our wallet works is whenever you want to log into your wallet, you click log in, and then what happens is we send you an encrypted file of your private keys. And then once you request, that's like putting in your email address just to say, I want to log in here. So you put in that, and then we'll send your computer a encrypted file with your private keys. And then on your computer, not leaving anywhere, you'll put in the password that decrypts it. So that means that only your local computer has access to the associated private keys. And that's when you can send, that's when you can receive, that's when you can do whatever you want. And then when you're done, you essentially click log out, and what happens is the wallet file is re-encrypted with your private key and then sent to our servers just for storage. So you can think of us like a glorified Dropbox or storage. But we can never look into your wallet. We can never send your Bitcoin for you. We don't really even know. We can't really tie identity to a wallet file. We're really trying to balance convenience and you know, the moral of what Bitcoin was trying to do, which is bring power back, bring power back to the individual. How much do you expect the Bitcoin prices to surge after 2 years? Oh man, you know, from being in the space for so long, in all honesty, I couldn't even tell you how much I expect the Bitcoin price to surge after 2 weeks. It's, you know, it's just something that I believe in, and I invested because I believe in it, and it's turned out great so far. But, you know, the number one thing is you never invest more than what you're willing to lose. And, you know, that's extremely important. So, you know, how much do I expect the Bitcoin prices to surge? I honestly couldn't tell you. And like I said earlier, I know that cryptocurrencies are here to stay. I know that some form of cryptocurrency will be a part of our everyday lives. And is it Bitcoin? I don't know. But, you know, we're in this day and age where technology comes and goes so quickly that we're just going to have to ride it out. Let me think. So why is the Bitcoin transaction fees high these days? So I would say what I was saying earlier, where this average block size is, the higher it is, the worse, because that means that not as many transactions can make it into a block. And so roughly every 10 minutes, you can only have a megabyte worth of data stored in the Bitcoin blockchain. So once it, you know, like this 0.998, like once it reaches this this height, this cap that the network sets, people will start increasing the network fees. So let's look at. So each for those who don't know, each transaction has a fee associated with it. So in this transaction, you can see, this is my advanced on. No. So in this transaction, you can see that this person, this public key, is sending this amount of Bitcoin to these two addresses. And in this transaction, they also include a miner's fee. And usually this is supposed to be as low as possible, but since there's so many people using the network at once, you know, sort of like you would tip your server at a restaurant, you sort of tip the miner that's going to be putting your transaction into a block. And, you know, once these fees start to go up, then people start competing with one another. So you can see here that, you know, as these blocks fill up, you know, almost, let's look at 60 days. So 60 days ago, the miners were making 87 Bitcoin a day, and then today they're making 269, just because, you know, more and more people are using the network, and more people want their transaction included over other people, so they, you know, there's this market to compete. So there's still, you know, Bitcoin scaling is a huge topic that I just want to try to avoid. Um, what are your views on enterprise Ethereum? Uh, I don't really know what enterprise Ethereum is, but I mean views on Ethereum in general. I like it. I think it's pretty cool, especially the smart contracts that I touched on earlier. Um, I think Ethereum is leveraging the blockchain in a very clever way, and really is trying to make a full suite of developer tools to interact with, to sort of bring the ability to interact with a blockchain to the common developer. So I keep a close eye. Like up here, you can see I have a Bitcoin ticker and an Ethereum ticker. So I keep a close eye on both, um, and both have amazing development behind them, and I'm excited to see where they go in 1, 2, or 3 years. Uh, what is Bitcoin mining? Mm, okay, I'll give a bird's eye view of this one. So Bitcoin mining essentially is, you can think of the block, these block numbers 458, 572, 573, 574. So the blockchain, all it is it's a glorified ledger book, and every page that's added is essentially like a block being added to the blockchain. And each block is like a company ledger book, just records a transaction of, Sally to Bob, Fred to, Fred, um, and then the amount. And then there's a whole mess of um, crypto where people are signing. You can see this person was in the Netherlands, or at least where they broadcasted the transaction. And there's a whole mess of cryptography that they can sign and verify that this transaction isn't fake or spoofed, but that's for another day. Um, but essentially, Bitcoin mining, you'll take all of these unconfirmed transactions like this. So this is a raw plugin of unconfirmed transactions. And so somebody will make this transaction and it'll say unconfirmed. And so what's happening at the same time as these transactions are being broadcasted, you'll have Bitcoin miners that are working, and that's where I bought up Hashrate Distribution. So these miners are essentially all trying to compete for finding the next page in the ledger book. And how they do that is they find what's like, so they essentially, uh, yeah, sweet. So what they're looking for is they're essentially given a problem, much like a Sudoku puzzle, and it's very large, and it's very a lot of rows, a lot of columns, and the only way that they can try to solve it is to throw a random set of numbers into it, check to see if it makes sense, and then wipe the board clean, and then do it again and again, hundreds and thousands and millions of times a second all over the world. And so finally, one pool is going to guess the right Sudoku combination, and then they're going to broadcast the answer. And once you have an answer to a Sudoku puzzle, it's easy to check, it's hard to find, and that's the whole mentality of this. So once they broadcast the right answer, and it's called a nonce, is what I'm trying to create an analogy to. Once they broadcast this right answer, they have the privilege of adding a block to the blockchain. And so you can see here that the first transaction ever in any block is called the Coinbase. And this is the reward for finding the block. And at this time, so they found the block. It's called proof of work. They proved that they worked for this answer. And they get, right off the bat, $13,000. And then in addition, so that's the first transaction. They send this to themselves, and then everything down here is the transactions that were broadcasted in limbo. They put those into the ledger page as well, up to a megabyte block size, and just with the fees that they collect off those transactions is roughly $1,400. And so once they have the answer to the Sudoku puzzle, they add the page to the ledger book or add the block to the blockchain, and then the whole process starts again of people trying to find the next answer to the Sudoku puzzle to get the reward, and then also add those transactions to get the miner's fee. So I hope that answers your question. Can we trust this distributed system? Because banks are a centralized system that we trust. So, I mean, like I said earlier, I trust that, there's a funny expression that's come from Bitcoin, but it's, in crypto we trust. Feel free to get a T-shirt or something. But I trust Bitcoin because I trust mathematics. Bitcoin adheres, it's completely publicly available, unlike any bank that you can find in the system in which it works. So the only laws that Bitcoin adheres to is not any laws really set forth by any person, state, company. The only laws that it adheres to is the law of mathematics and cryptography. So, I mean, I'm not saying pull all your money from your bank account, because again, like in the developed world, it's more or less pretty stable. But I trust this system with a good amount of money to trust it, and I think that it might not be the most user friendly as it is right now, but it's getting there. It's sort of like in the early days of the internet, where the only way to access it would be to buy this expensive computer that's worth thousands of dollars, and then you'd have to remember each website by its IP address rather than an actual name. And then when you got there, it was just purely text based. But everything is moving faster and faster, so computers became more affordable, domain names came out, protocols were established, websites became more than just text, and now we have such an integral part of our lives. So Bitcoin's getting there. Bitcoin, blockchain technology, they're both getting there. They're not there yet, but even just in the 3 years that I've been in here, like the amount of development has been crazy. Question. So this is regarding the storage project. As the file is distributed over the general systems rather than maintained like AWS, sometimes isn't it better to have some authority whom you can point to in case of any downtime? And well, that's what I was trying to bring with this, where this project tries to avoid any and all downtime. So recently in the news, for those who've seen it, those who haven't, like AWS went down in the East Coast. Something that people thought. I mean, AWS is huge. I mean, they're the leaders in cloud computing, cloud storage, arguably, and they went down, and it brought down a whole mess of platforms and sites. That's something that nobody thought would be able to do. And so yeah, there's a central authority there that people can point to and blame, but the idea or the inspiration from storage is, if you can have the equivalent to AWS except you have your file replicated for 3 times for free and then distributed all over the world. I mean, imagine if you hosted your site on US East or United States East Coast data center for AWS. Anybody near that platform, they would get pretty significant upload download with your website or whatever you put there for people to interact with. But if somebody were to access it in China across the world, then they would have to go to that data center, and it would still take time. So the storage network says we can put your file as close to everywhere as possible. And so instead of somebody in China trying to access your central point of failure in United States East, they can use that distributed hash table system that I was talking about to just find the closest file to them. So they'll just look around China and then just spread out from there, as opposed to just going to the US East. So yeah. Let's get another one. These are good questions, by the way. Yeah, definitely keep them coming. Is Bitcoin useful only when it is used at large scale? I'm going to interpret this question as only when you send, so this transaction. So I was waiting for a block to be mined, but you can see here that it's unconfirmed, and then I'm going to refresh it, and then now it's confirmed in a block. So this is included in block 458576, which is the newest block to the blockchain, and so that's how it gets its confirmation. It's just, hey, I'm confirming that it's made it into the Bitcoin network, and then I'll refresh this later. And as there's another block, then it's going to say 2 confirmations because it's 2 pages back. But to go back, so the only thing that I would say that Bitcoin is, they're still trying to figure out microtransactions, so sending pennies for free. And that's their technology called Thunder, and what we're at Blockchain working on, which you can read our blog post. But essentially, yeah, the Thunder network. So development is still being done to try to work on sending and receiving fractions of a penny incredibly quickly for free. But as it stands now, with Bitcoin in its current state, when you send some funds, you're going to have to pay a good amount in fees. So it's not the most ideal, because, like I said, this is a technology that's never been tried before, and it's still being developed heavily. So for large transactions, you can bite like a $5 fee, but if you're sending $5, it doesn't make any sense to pay $5 in fees. If Bitcoin has the power to replace today's currency, then how much will it be useful? And so this is where I forgot to. I'm glad you brought this question up, because I forgot to touch on it when I brought up the email example. But when I was talking about this email example, email didn't replace the postal system. Rather, it was an enhancement. So we still use United States Postal Service, UPS, FedEx, whatever, for specific use cases, and then for other specific use cases we use email. And Bitcoin is much the same way. I'm not saying it's going to replace fiat completely. I'm saying it's going to be a very nice complement for specific use cases, like sending funds to across the country instantly, or globally, whatever. So I would say Bitcoin is going to be Bitcoin, a cryptocurrency, is going to be a very nice complement to a fiat currency system. it said the last Bitcoin will be mined in 2040 at current rate. Is that true? So yes, yes, it is true. We can look at our charts. I really recommend you guys, like, if you have some time, just click around on our charts page. Just we have little descriptions and stuff, but it's just fun to look at. So you're looking at Coinbase. Oh, shoot. Uh, oh, here it is. Okay, so this is a chart of Bitcoins in circulation, and then all time. So roughly every 4 years, the rewards will you can. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a bend right here, but it's gone from 50 Bitcoin a block, and then it halved to 25 Bitcoins reward for every block, and then it halved again to 12 and a half. So that's what we have today is 12 and a half right here, 12 and a half Bitcoins for every block. And then in another, when this made the change, in another 4 years, it'll be half of that, and so on and so on. So I think the number is 2040, but the fact is, this is going to get smaller and smaller until it's like, fractions of a fraction, where it's still technically getting a block reward, but nothing significant. And then the idea behind that was the value here will be able to be replaced by transaction fees. So that was that's the long-term goal with the Bitcoin network. All right, I'll do 3 more questions. Are blockchain's APIs free to be used, or is it a paid version for developers? All of our APIs are completely free on Blockchain.info/API. You guys, you can use it as much as you want. The only thing is with our so with our if you're looking for blockchain data for using our WebSockets that I talked about, or market data, you can use it literally right now. No worries, nothing. If you're using it for payment processing or our wallet feature, you need to request an API key. But these keys are free. It's just to prevent people from DOSing or requesting too heavily our services. But you just make an application, and then it'll get approved in a day or two, and then you can email to rock and roll. So yeah, I mean, play around, feel free. Is it profitable to become a Bitcoin miner using cloud mining? So I'm just going to say no. Don't really. From my experience, from things that I've seen, research that I've done, Bitcoin mining it's not something that an average person can do anymore. Because it's so competitive. Like when I'm talking about the that Sudoku example before, back when it first started, for the first 3 or 4 years, it was a Sudoku puzzle that a couple computers together could solve. But now, like the Bitcoin mining has become an entire industry in and of itself. So even in the last 2 years, you can see that these are sort of difficulty jumps in the network. So if people are solving the answer too quickly, then the network will get harder. It'll like add rows, add columns to this Sudoku puzzle to make it harder, and try to just meet that 10-minute average block time. And so it's just gotten to the point where it's too hard for an average computer, and I've never heard good things about investing in cloud mining So I personally wouldn't recommend it. Um, all right, I'm gonna do one more question. So let's look at um, a lot about mining. So again, like I really wouldn't recommend anybody to mine. Um, it's just if you want, you can mine Bitcoin or Ethereum. That's still within the realm of um, something that can be done. Um, and then final question: will the network transaction fees keep rising like this? Um, if yes, then would it become similar like a bank as they charge a fee for a transaction? So um, there's a lot of like political debate within the Bitcoin network about forking it um, to essentially help scale with the fees that are going crazy. Um, so as it stands now, probably the network will keep on increasing the fees until something is figured out. Um, at least it's there's definitely work being done to solve this. And then the other part of the question was, would there be a fee or would there be a percentage? So it's never a percentage of the transaction. It's always just a flat rate um, tip as to what people are willing or trying to get their um, transactions included in the network. And again, like this is a hot topic right now in the Bitcoin space. So um, it's this technology has never been done before, so there's growing pains, but the whole network is working together to figure it out. Uh, okay. I think it's about a little over an hour. So thanks so much for everybody to tuning in. I hope I answered and clarified as much as possible regarding Bitcoin and cool um, use cases. If anybody is interested in the slides, I'll give it to the organizers here, and they can help give it to um, whoever wants it. So great. Thanks so much, everybody.